Her people left the Cherokee woman buried in sand. She closed her eyes to die until a cowboy came. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the riverbank with warm shades of gold and red. A Hivana, a young Cherokee woman, walked along the sandy shore, her bare feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine and river water. She had grown up hearing stories of the river's power, of how it could give life and take it away, but never had she imagined that it would be the witness to a moment like this, one filled with fear, betrayal, and despair. Ahivana's heart pounded as she glanced back at her tribe. A small group of elders and hunters followed her, their faces heavy with judgment. Their eyes, once warm and welcoming, now looked cold and distant. They did not speak, but the silence itself seemed to weigh on her like a stone. She remembered the words they had spoken in the council earlier that day, words that now seemed like a knife in her chest. They accused her of breaking a law that she had barely understood, a law that had been part of the old customs for generations. "I never meant to disobey," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Her fingers dug into the sand, feeling its coarse grains slip through her grasp. The elders' decision was final. They believed that her actions had angered the spirits and brought shame to their people. In their eyes, the punishment was necessary. Ahivna had been sentenced to be buried in the sand at low tide, left for the river to decide her fate. As she walked toward the spot where the sand was deepest, Ahivna felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. She thought of her family, of the songs her mother used to sing to her when she was a child. Those melodies had once filled her heart with joy, but now they seemed distant, like echoes from another life. Her chest tightened, and she could feel tears brimming in her eyes. She tried to swallow them, tried to hold on to some small piece of hope, but the reality of her situation was unbearable. The elders began their work quietly. They guided her to a flat area of sand near the riverbank, where the tide would soon rise. The water glimmered in the evening light, its surface calm yet threatening. Ahivna knelt as they instructed, her hands shaking as she helped herself get into position. She felt the grains of sand against her skin, coarse and heavy, a tangible reminder of the punishment that awaited her. "Close your eyes," one elder said softly, though there was no kindness in the words. "Accept what is to come." Ahivna obeyed, not out of submission, but out of sheer exhaustion. She had no strength left to argue or protest. Her mind wandered to memories of her childhood in the forest, the laughter of friends who had long since gone their separate ways, the warmth of her mother's embrace, and the gentle teachings of her father about the ways of the land. She clung to these memories like a lifeline, even as the elders began to cover her with sand. The process was slow and methodical. Each handful of sand that fell upon her felt heavier than the last. Ahivana could feel her movements becoming restricted, her breaths shallower. The weight pressed against her chest, and panic began to rise. Though she tried to control it, she whispered a silent prayer, not to the tribe or to the elders, but to the spirits she had always felt around her, in the trees, the river, and the wind. "Give me strength," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a bird. "If I am to die, let me face it with courage." Her thoughts drifted to the future she would never have, to dreams that would remain unfulfilled. She imagined herself traveling to distant lands, learning new stories, and seeing the world beyond the riverbanks. But now, those dreams seemed impossibly far away. The sand pressed harder, filling the space around her, and she felt herself slipping into a quiet numbness. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an eternity. The tide was beginning to move, and the water lapped gently against the edge of the sand. Ahiva opened her eyes slightly, looking at the calm surface, so peaceful yet indifferent to the struggle it would soon witness. She thought of surrendering, of letting the river claim her without resistance. The fear was there, yes, but there was also a strange clarity. She understood the fragility of life in a way she never had before, and yet, deep within her, a tiny spark refused to die. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can hold on to hope. She clutched the sand around her hands, feeling the grains slip through her fingers.
I am still here, she whispered to herself. I am still breathing.
I am not gone yet. The elders stepped back, satisfied that their task was complete. They did not speak, but their faces were solemn, as if they too felt the weight of what had been done. Ahivna could hear their footsteps fading, leaving her alone with the sand, the wind, and the rising tide. She closed her eyes again, preparing herself for the final moments she believed were coming. Her mind wandered once more, recalling the stories of her people, tales of warriors, healers, and wise elders who had faced impossible challenges. She thought of the women who had survived storms, hunger, and loss, who had found strength in the most hopeless situations. Could she be one of them? Could she survive when all seemed lost? The answer was not clear, and the fear returned in full force. But even as the panic clawed at her chest, she felt the tiniest flicker of defiance. She would not go quietly, not without feeling, not without a fight, even if it was only a fight against the sand, the weight, and her own despair. The river continued its slow approach, the water glimmering with the last rays of sunlight. Ahivana's breaths grew shallow, and the sand pressed more heavily against her chest. She whispered one final prayer, not for her life, but for understanding, for forgiveness, and for the strength to face whatever came next. And then, just as the tide began to reach her, a new sound stirred the quiet evening, the soft, deliberate steps of someone approaching. Ahivana's heart skipped a beat. She opened her eyes, not fully aware of what she might find, but sensing that her story was far from over. For the first time since she had been buried, a flicker of hope returned, fragile and uncertain, but alive. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved across the sand, heading toward her. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft glow over the river, and Ahivna felt something she had not felt in hours, the possibility of life. She had closed her eyes to die, but now, with each step that approached, she realized that perhaps her story was not finished. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had not been abandoned entirely. Her fingers dug into the sand again, not in despair, but in quiet determination. She would hold on, even if she did not know why. She would fight, even if the fight seemed impossible. And somewhere in the distance the footsteps drew nearer, promising a turn of fate that Ahivna had not dared to imagine. The footsteps grew closer, crunching softly on the sand, yet each sound felt like thunder in Ahivna's ears. Her chest ached, the weight of the sand pressing against her, but she could not help the sudden flicker of hope that sprang up inside her. She tried to lift herself, but her arms trembled, and her strength was fading fast. Every movement was a battle, every breath a reminder of how close she had come to the edge of death. She heard the sound of leather boots and the gentle creak of a horse nearby. Someone had come, not the river, not the spirits, but a living, breathing human being. Her eyes widened as a shadow appeared over her in the dimming light. The figure knelt beside her, and she could see the face now. A man, rugged and weathered, with deep eyes that seemed to hold both surprise and concern. He spoke softly, his voice calm and steady. Hold on, miss. Don't give up. Ahivna's lips quivered. She wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but her throat felt dry and tight. She could only nod faintly, trying to signal that she was alive, that she had not surrendered entirely to the sand and the rising tide. The man didn't hesitate. He began digging, his hands swift and practiced, as if he had done this many times before. The grains of sand shifted and tumbled over her, but slowly, painstakingly, he freed her from their heavy grip. Each movement was careful, deliberate, yet urgent, as the tide continued to creep closer. Ahivna gasped as the weight lifted from her chest, the air filling her lungs in deep, grateful breaths. For the first time in hours, she felt the cool evening breeze against her face, and with it, a strange, fragile relief. Almost there, the man murmured, his hand steadying her shoulders. Finally, he pulled her free, and she collapsed into his arms, trembling from exhaustion, cold, and shock. Her body felt weak, yet alive, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Tears of fear, relief, and disbelief all at once. The man smiled gently, brushing sand from her hair. You're safe now. You're going to be all right, he said. I've got you.
She tried to speak, but her voice barely rose above a whisper. Who are you? Caleb, he said simply.
I was passing through, looking for a lost herd of cattle. Saw your situation and came as fast as I could. Ahivna's mind struggled to process his words. In the midst of her despair, a stranger, someone who didn't belong to her tribe, someone she had never met, had come to save her. She wanted to thank him, to express her gratitude, but the words felt too heavy to form. Instead, she simply closed her eyes, letting herself rest for a moment against his chest, feeling the steady beat of life against her own. Caleb didn't rush. He knew she was weak, and he understood that a sudden move could do more harm than good. Carefully, he lifted her, wrapping her in a worn blanket he had with him. Her body felt fragile, her limbs trembling, but she held on to him, clinging to the warmth he offered. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of pink, orange, and deep violet. Caleb guided her toward a small cabin he had built near the edge of the forest, a place he used when traveling through the wilderness. The path was uneven, but he moved with a sure, steady pace, his hands supporting her every step. Ahivna's thoughts drifted in and out as they walked. She remembered the feeling of betrayal, the harsh judgment of her tribe, and the suffocating weight of the sand. But now, amid fear and exhaustion, she felt something new, a quiet hope that perhaps her life was not meant to end here. She dared to imagine a world beyond the river, beyond the tribe's rigid rules. She dared to imagine a chance to survive. When they reached the cabin, Caleb set her gently on a bed of soft furs. He lit a small fire in the hearth, and the warmth slowly seeped into her frozen limbs. She shivered, overwhelmed by the sensations she had missed: warmth, safety, and the simple comfort of being alive. Caleb moved with quiet efficiency, tending to small cuts and scratches, cleaning them with water he had warmed over the fire. You're lucky, he said softly. The tide would have taken you in a few minutes if I hadn't been there. Ahivna tried to speak, but her voice failed her. Instead, she nodded faintly, her eyes wide, staring at him in silent awe. She had been buried in the sand, left for dead by her own people, and now she was being cared for by a stranger, someone who had no reason to help her, yet had risked his own time and effort to save her life. Hours passed. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with its gentle warmth and soft light. Caleb kept watch, occasionally murmuring reassuring words, while Ahivna drifted in and out of consciousness. She dreamed in those brief moments of forests, rivers, and the moments of her childhood when life felt simple and safe. The dreams were fragile, but they reminded her that there was still life within her, a spark that refused to die. As the night deepened, Ahivna slowly regained some strength. She could lift her head, though her limbs still felt like lead. She watched Caleb as he moved around the cabin, preparing a simple meal. The smell of roasted meat and herbs filled the air, and for the first time since her punishment, she felt a flicker of normalcy. "Can you eat?" he asked gently, setting a small bowl in front of her. Ahiva nodded. Though her stomach felt weak, she ate slowly, savoring each bite, each taste reminding her that she was still alive. Every morsel was a small victory, a reminder that she had been given a second chance. After the meal, she leaned back against the furs, her eyes following Caleb as he sat down beside the fire. He was quiet, patient, and kind, a stark contrast to the elders who had condemned her. She wanted to speak, to tell him her story, but the words felt heavy and unfamiliar. Instead, she simply let the silence stretch between them, comforted by his presence. Gradually, she began to recount the events that had led her here. Her voice was soft, hesitant, and tinged with sorrow, but she spoke with honesty. She told Caleb about the accusations, the punishment, and the feeling of being abandoned by her own people. He listened intently, never interrupting, never judging, only offering the occasional nod or word of understanding. "You didn't deserve this," he said finally, his voice firm but gentle. "No one does. You fought to survive, and that's all that matters now. You're still here, and that's a sign you're stronger than you know." Ahivna felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever offered understanding without judgment. She realized, for the first time since she had been buried in the sand, that not all people were cruel. Some were capable of compassion, of selfless kindness. The night wore on, and Ahivna's body slowly recovered. She could sit up, stretch her limbs, and even laugh softly at the small jokes Caleb made about his travels. For the first time in hours, she felt something like peace, a fragile sense that perhaps her life was not over, that perhaps she could endure more than she had imagined. As she lay back against the furs, staring at the flames dancing in the hearth, Ahivna realized something important. Survival was not just about escaping death. It was about finding hope in the darkest moments, about trusting in the kindness of others, and about discovering strength within oneself that one had never known existed. And though she did not yet know what tomorrow would bring, she felt a quiet determination forming inside her. She would survive. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead. She would reclaim her life, no matter how difficult the journey might be. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Ahiva closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest, to heal, and to dream of the life she had been given a second chance to live. The river, the sand, and the elders' harsh judgment were still part of her story, but now, so was Caleb, the stranger who had risked his time and energy to pull her from the brink of death. And in that quiet night, Ahivna understood something she had not before. Sometimes, life saves you in ways you never expect, through the hands of strangers, the kindness of strangers, and the strength you find when all seems lost. She was alive, and for the first time in hours, she truly felt it. The morning sunlight filtered through the small window of the cabin, casting soft golden beams across the rough wooden floor. Havina stirred slowly, feeling the warmth of the fire from the night before and the steady rhythm of Caleb's movements around her. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light, and realized she had slept deeply for the first time in what felt like forever. Her body ached, and her limbs were stiff, but she was alive, and that realization filled her with a quiet gratitude. Caleb noticed her movement and smiled gently. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "How are you feeling?" Ahivna shifted slightly, wincing as her muscles protested. "Better?" she replied softly. "Sore, but better." He nodded and handed her a small bowl of warm broth. "Eat something. It will help your strength return." She accepted it, her hands trembling slightly as she brought the bowl to her lips. The warmth of the liquid and its simple, comforting taste reminded her of home, of simpler times before the pain and betrayal. With each sip, she felt a little more alive, a little more capable of facing the world again. As she ate, Caleb watched her with quiet attentiveness. There was something in his gaze, patience, understanding, and something deeper, like respect. Ahivna found herself noticing the small details, the way his hands moved with care, the way he listened even in silence, the quiet confidence he carried without arrogance. For someone she had only just met, he felt like a steady anchor in a world that had been cruel and unpredictable. After breakfast, Caleb helped her rise to her feet. Her legs wobbled under her weight, but with his support, she managed to stand and take a few tentative steps. Each movement was a reminder of the strength she had always possessed, buried beneath fear and exhaustion.
"You're stronger than you think,"
Caleb said, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't let what happened to you define who you are. You've survived this far. You can go further." Ahiva nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel that strength within herself. And slowly, as the minutes passed, she began to feel it. The quiet, steady power that comes from enduring, from surviving against the odds. They spent the morning together in quiet activity. Caleb showed her how to gather fresh water from the stream nearby, how to tend to small injuries with herbs and clean cloths, and how to move safely through the surrounding forest. Ahivana listened carefully, absorbing every word, every gesture, knowing that these skills could mean the difference between life and death in the wild. As the sun climbed higher, she felt a shift within herself. The fear that had gripped her so tightly the day before began to loosen its hold. She realized that survival was not only about escaping danger, it was also about learning, adapting, and trusting in the support that others could offer. Caleb had risked his time and effort to save her, and now it was up to her to honor that gift by embracing the life that remained. "Tell me more about yourself," Caleb said during a brief rest by the river. He had tied his horse nearby, and the sound of water flowing over smooth stones filled the air. "You've been through a lot, but I want to know who you are beyond what happened yesterday." Ahivna hesitated, unsure where to begin. Her life had been filled with joy, sorrow, and lessons that now seemed distant, but she decided to start with the basics: her childhood in the forest, the stories her parents had told, the skills she had learned from her people, and the dreams she had once held. As she spoke, she felt a sense of relief. For the first time in hours, she was not defined by her punishment or the betrayal she had endured. She was simply herself, a young woman with a story, a past, and the potential for a future. Caleb listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, asking gentle questions when something intrigued him. There was no judgment in his gaze, only curiosity and respect. Ahivana found herself relaxing in his presence, allowing her thoughts and emotions to flow freely. The burden of isolation she had carried was beginning to lift, replaced by a fragile, growing sense of trust. They returned to the cabin as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. Caleb prepared a simple meal, and they ate together in companionable silence. Ahiva noticed small details, the way he hummed softly as he worked, the way he arranged the firewood to keep the room warm, the careful attention he paid to even the smallest tasks. It was comforting, reassuring, and in its own way, inspiring. After the meal, Caleb suggested a short walk along the riverbank. "You need to regain your strength," he said. "Even small steps will help." Ahivna nodded, feeling the ache in her muscles but determined to try. With his support, she moved slowly, each step a small triumph. She watched the water flow, its surface sparkling in the fading light, and felt a deep connection to the world around her. For the first time since being buried in the sand, she felt alive, fully present in the moment, and aware of the beauty that still existed in life. As they walked, Caleb spoke of his travels, of the places he had seen, and the people he had met. Ahivna listened with fascination, imagining worlds beyond her own experiences. She felt a spark of curiosity ignite within her, a desire to see more, learn more, and experience more. It was a feeling she had not allowed herself to feel for a long time, and it brought with it a renewed sense of purpose. The conversation shifted naturally to their own challenges and fears. Ahivna spoke of the betrayal she had suffered, the harsh judgment of her tribe, and the fear she had felt as the sand had pressed against her. Caleb listened, offering words of understanding and encouragement. "You've been through something unimaginable," he said, "but you made it through. That's proof of your courage." Ahivna felt warmth spread through her chest. It was more than just physical comfort. It was a recognition, an acknowledgement of her strength and resilience. She realized that while the past could not be changed, the future was still hers to shape, and for the first time in a long time she believed that she had the power to do so. As night fell, they returned to the cabin. Caleb built a fire in the hearth, and Ahivna sat close, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. She reflected on the day, on the small victories, the steps taken toward recovery, and the trust she had begun to place in someone outside her own people. The bond that had formed between them was subtle, quiet, but powerful, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, human connection could bring light and hope. Before sleep claimed her again, Ahivna spoke softly.
"Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I
don't know what I would have done without you." Caleb smiled, resting his hand lightly on hers. "You would have survived," he said. "You're stronger than you know." "I just helped a little." She closed her eyes, letting the fire's warmth and his presence soothe her. For the first time since her punishment, she felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally. She understood now that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about allowing oneself to receive help, to trust, and to rebuild. The night passed peacefully, the soft sounds of the forest outside the cabin lulling her into a deep sleep. Her dreams were filled with rivers, forests, and the faces of people she loved, both past and imagined. For the first time in days, she did not dream of fear or suffocation, but of life, of possibility, and of the strength that resided within her. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Ahivna awoke with a renewed sense of determination. She stretched her limbs, feeling the stiffness gradually give way to energy. She realized that recovery was not just physical, but also emotional and mental. With Caleb's help, she had begun to reclaim not only her body, but also her confidence, her trust, and her hope. Caleb was already awake, tending the small fire and preparing a simple breakfast. He looked up as she stirred, offering a small, encouraging smile. "Ready for another day?" he asked. Ahivna nodded, feeling a quiet excitement. "Yes," she said. I I think I am. And with that, they began another day together. One of small steps, quiet victories, and the slow but steady rebuilding of a life that had once seemed lost. The river, the sand, and the fear of yesterday were still part of her story, but so too was hope, kindness, and the knowledge that she was not alone. For the first time since she had been buried, Ahivna felt a sense of purpose. She would continue to heal. She would continue to grow. And she would not let the past define her. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in days, she felt ready to face it, step by step, with courage and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. The morning light spilled through the cabin window in soft golden rays, warming the small room where Ahivna was beginning to feel stronger than she had in days. Her body was still weak, and her muscles ached, but each breath she took reminded her that she had survived the impossible. The memory of the sand, the weight, the fear of drowning under her own punishment was still fresh in her mind, yet she could feel a new strength stirring within her, a determination to move forward, to reclaim not just her life, but her sense of self. Caleb was already busy outside, tending to his horse and gathering wood for the fire. The calm sound of the river nearby and the soft rustling of leaves gave Ahivna a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. She rose slowly, testing her legs. They wobbled beneath her, but with each careful step she took around the cabin, she felt the steady return of strength and confidence. "You're improving quickly," Caleb said as he noticed her moving. His eyes carried a quiet pride, but more than that, they carried reassurance. "You're stronger than you realize. Soon you'll be able to walk freely without my help." Ahivna smiled faintly, her lips curving in a gesture that was almost shy. I hope so," she replied. "I want to be able to move on my own." Caleb nodded. "We'll take it step by step. There's no rush." The day began with small exercises. Caleb guided her through gentle stretches, helping her regain mobility in her arms and legs. She wobbled, fell occasionally, but each attempt strengthened her resolve. With Caleb's support, she began to feel the muscles in her legs wake from the long hours of immobility. Each movement, no matter how small, was a victory. She could feel her heart beating faster, her lungs drawing in the fresh forest air, and her spirit lifting with each passing hour. After the morning exercises, Caleb suggested they go for a short walk outside the cabin. "The fresh air will help, and you'll see that the world is still waiting for you," he said. Ahivna hesitated for a moment, still cautious of her own body and unsure of how far she could go. But the thought of the forest, the river, and the warmth of sunlight on her skin was too tempting to resist. She stepped outside, feeling the uneven earth beneath her feet. Her first few steps were tentative, but Caleb stayed close, ready to support her if needed. The smell of pine, earth, and river water filled her senses. Birds sang in the trees, and the distant sound of water flowing over stones was soothing, almost musical. Ahivna took a deep breath, feeling the cool air expand her chest and fill her lungs. For the first time since she had been buried in the sand, she felt alive in every sense of the word. As they walked, Caleb spoke of his own life, his travels through forests and plains, and the people he had met along the way. Ahivna listened intently, fascinated by his stories. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the fear and betrayal that had defined the last few days. She began to think of possibilities, of discovering new places, learning new skills, and meeting people who, like Caleb, might show kindness and compassion in unexpected ways. The conversation gradually turned to deeper subjects. Ahivna shared memories of her childhood in the Cherokee village, of the lessons her parents had taught her, and the joys and fears she had known before the betrayal. Caleb listened without interruption, his attention unwavering, his respect clear. It was unlike anything Ahivna had experienced before. For the first time she felt that her words mattered, that her feelings were valid, and that someone truly cared to understand her. "You have a strong heart," Caleb said after a moment of silence. "You survived something that would have broken many. That courage isn't something everyone has. It's inside you already." Ahivna felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was not only reassurance but also an acknowledgement that she was more than her suffering. That day, walking along the river bank, she began to understand that survival was not just about being alive. It was about reclaiming her spirit, trusting herself again, and realizing that the world still had room for her. The afternoon passed with gentle training, tending to small injuries, and learning how to move through the forest safely. Caleb showed her how to gather edible plants, how to purify water, and how to recognize signs in the environment that could help or warn travelers. Each lesson was more than just practical, it was empowering. Ahivna felt herself regaining not only physical strength, but also confidence in her own abilities. By evening, they returned to the cabin, where Caleb prepared a simple meal. As they ate, Ahivna spoke more freely than she had in days, sharing hopes and fears she had kept hidden. Caleb listened, never judging, never interrupting, only offering quiet support and encouragement. For Ahivna, this simple act of being heard was as restorative as the food and warmth around her. After the meal, Caleb suggested they sit by the fire. "You've made incredible progress today," he said, settling across from her. "Tomorrow you'll take even more steps toward standing fully on your own." Ahivna nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I want to," she said softly. "I want to be able to walk, to run, to live freely again." The night settled around the cabin, quiet and calm. Ahivna lay on the furs, her mind turning over the day's events. She reflected on the journey from despair to hope, from weakness to strength. Each moment of courage, each step she had taken reminded her that life was precious, fragile, but also resilient. She realized that trust could be rebuilt, even after betrayal, and that kindness could come from unexpected sources. In the quiet moments before sleep, Ahivna thought about Caleb. He was a stranger who had saved her life, yet in his actions, he had given her more than survival. He had given her hope, companionship, and a model of compassion and strength. She understood now that human connection, even brief and unexpected, could change the course of a life. When sleep finally claimed her, it was deep and restorative. Her dreams were no longer filled with fear or suffocation, but with rivers, forests, and the possibility of a future she could shape herself. She dreamed of walking freely along the riverbank, of sunlight warming her face, and of laughter and joy returning to her life. Morning brought a renewed sense of purpose. Ahivna rose, stretching her limbs and testing her strength. She could now walk more steadily, though still with caution. The exercises from yesterday, combined with her growing confidence, had made a noticeable difference. She felt capable of moving further, exploring more, and reclaiming the life she had almost lost. Caleb prepared a simple breakfast, and they shared the meal in companionable silence. Afterwards, he guided her through more exercises and practical skills. Ahivna felt a quiet determination growing within her. She was no longer just surviving, she was preparing to thrive, to reclaim independence, and to face whatever challenges awaited her with courage. By midday, Ahivna was able to walk longer distances without Caleb's assistance. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt familiar and safe. She noticed details she had missed before: the soft moss underfoot, the songs of birds in the treetops, the way sunlight danced on the river. Each observation was a reminder that life was full of beauty, even after hardship. As they rested by the river in the afternoon, Ahivna reflected on how far she had come. From the despair of being buried in sand to the uncertainty of her recovery to this moment of quiet strength, she realized that she had survived not only physically, but emotionally. She had reclaimed a sense of agency, trust, and hope, qualities that could never be taken from her again. Caleb watched her with quiet satisfaction, understanding that true recovery was more than physical healing. It was emotional, mental, and spiritual. He said little, allowing her the space to reflect, grow, and regain her confidence. And Ahivna appreciated this more than words could express. As evening approached, they returned to the cabin once again. Ahivna's movements were steadier now, her body stronger, her mind clearer. She knew that she was ready to face more challenges in the days ahead, but she also knew that she was not alone. The kindness and guidance of Caleb, combined with her own inner strength, had given her the tools she needed to move forward. That night, as she lay by the fire, Ahivna allowed herself a rare feeling: peace. The fear, the betrayal, and the pain were still part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She had survived, grown stronger, and found trust again. She understood now that life could be beautiful even after suffering, and that hope could emerge from the darkest moments. And in that quiet night, Ahivna made a promise to herself. She would continue to grow, continue to heal, and continue to reclaim her life, step by step, no longer buried in sand, no longer defined by betrayal. She would move forward with courage, resilience, and the knowledge that she had survived against all odds. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, and Ahivna stood outside the cabin, feeling the cool morning breeze on her face. Her legs were strong now, her body fully awake, and her mind clear. The days she had spent recovering with Caleb had given her more than strength. They had given her courage, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. The river flowed quietly nearby, its gentle current a reminder of the fragility and beauty of life. Ahivna had made a decision. She would return to her tribe, not to beg for forgiveness, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim her voice, her dignity, and her right to live freely. She knew it would be difficult. She knew there might be anger, suspicion, or rejection, but she also knew that she had survived what many thought impossible, and that survival had given her a strength that no one could take away. Caleb approached her, a small pack of supplies in hand. "Are you ready?" he asked gently, sensing the determination in her eyes. Ahivna nodded. "Yes, I need to face them. I need to show them that I am still alive, and that I am stronger than their fear." He offered her a reassuring smile. "I'll be with you as long as you need. You're not alone in this." Together, they traveled back toward the village, the journey quiet except for the sound of their footsteps on the forest floor and the occasional call of a bird. Ahivna felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Memories of the sand, the rising tide, and the elder's harsh judgment surfaced briefly, but she pushed them aside. Those memories were part of her past, not her future. She would face what came next with courage. As they neared the village, Ahivna could see the familiar structures of her people. The small wooden homes, the smoke rising from cooking fires, and the paths she had walked countless times in her youth. She noticed the villagers beginning their day, tending to crops, caring for children, and moving with the rhythm of daily life. Some paused to glance at her, curiosity and surprise written on their faces. The elders were waiting near the center of the village, their expressions unreadable. Ahivna took a deep breath, feeling the strength in her legs and the steadiness in her heart. She stepped forward, Caleb close behind, and addressed the elders with a calm but firm voice. "I am Ahivna," she began. "I am alive, despite the punishment I was given. I do not seek revenge, but I do seek understanding, and I wish to speak my truth." The elders exchanged glances, some appearing uneasy, others wary. Ahivna continued, her words carrying the weight of her experience and the clarity of her newfound strength. She spoke of the fear she had felt, the pain of being buried, and the moments when she had thought life was ending. She spoke of survival, hope, and the lessons she had learned in the days following her near death. She did not raise her voice in anger, nor did she plead for sympathy. Instead, she spoke with honesty, courage, and dignity. Her words flowed like the river near the cabin, steady and clear, carrying the truth of her experience to those who had condemned her. One of the eldest men finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You survived what we thought would end you. You faced death and returned. Perhaps we were wrong in our judgment." Havina nodded, feeling a sense of validation but also maintaining her calm. "I survived because I refused to give up. I survived because hope, courage, and human kindness still exist. I survived because I found strength within myself that no one can take away." The villagers, who had been watching silently, began to murmur among themselves. Some looked ashamed, realizing the harshness of the punishment they had supported. Others looked in awe, recognizing the bravery and resilience of a young woman who had faced death and returned stronger. Ahivna took another deep breath, her eyes meeting those of the elders. "I do not seek punishment for those who judged me, nor do I wish to bring shame. I only ask that my story be remembered, that future decisions be guided by understanding and compassion, and that no one else should suffer as I did." A silence fell over the village, heavy and contemplative. The elders lowered their heads, and some bowed slightly in acknowledgement. In that moment, Ahivna felt the weight of fear and anger lift from her heart. She had faced her past, spoken her truth, and remained dignified. She had reclaimed her voice. Caleb stepped forward quietly, but Ahivna shook her head gently. "I will continue this journey on my own," she said. "But I thank you for helping me reach this moment. You have been my guide, my strength, and my friend." He smiled, understanding her need for independence. "You are ready," he said simply. "And I knew you would be." With that, Ahivna turned away from the elders and walked through the village, feeling the sunlight on her face and the wind on her skin. She noticed the children playing, the villagers working, and the life around her continuing. For the first time, she felt fully present, fully alive, and fully herself. She thought about the river, the sand, and the dark moments she had endured. But she also thought about Caleb, the cabin, and the small but significant victories that had brought her to this day. She realized that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about embracing the lessons learned along the way, about reclaiming hope, and about finding strength in both oneself and the kindness of others. Ahivna walked to the edge of the village and paused, looking out at the forest beyond. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. But she felt ready. She had survived the impossible, faced fear and betrayal, and emerged stronger than she had ever been. She was no longer defined by the past, nor by the judgments of others. She was free to shape her own future. She whispered a quiet thank you to the river, the forest, and the spirits she had always felt around her. "Thank you for guiding me, for giving me strength, and for showing me the way," she said softly. And then she turned, taking her first steps toward a new life, one filled with hope, courage, and endless possibilities. She walked with purpose, each step a testament to the strength she had discovered within herself and the resilience of the human spirit. In the days that followed, Ahivna continued to rebuild her life. She reconnected with parts of her community, not as someone seeking approval, but as a person confident in her own worth. She shared her story with others, teaching lessons of courage, hope, and compassion. The villagers began to change, slowly and quietly, guided by the example of her strength and dignity. Ahivna never forgot Caleb, the stranger who had come at the right moment to pull her from the brink of death. Though he eventually continued on his own journey, his impact remained. He had shown her the power of kindness, the importance of trust, and the belief that even in the darkest moments a human hand extended in help could change a life forever. As seasons passed, Ahivna grew in confidence and wisdom. She learned to navigate the challenges of life with patience and courage. She taught younger members of her village the lessons she had learned: to face fear with bravery, to trust in the strength within themselves, and to show compassion even when others failed. The memory of being buried in the sand never left her, but it no longer held her captive. Instead, it became a symbol of her resilience, a reminder of how far she had come, and of the inner strength that could never be taken away. She understood that life's hardships were not just obstacles, but opportunities to grow, to discover courage, and to embrace hope. Years later, Ahivna would stand by the river once more, feeling the same water that had once threatened to claim her. She would look back on her journey, the fear, the pain, and the incredible gift of survival, and she would smile. She had faced death and returned stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had reclaimed her life, and in doing so, she had inspired others to find strength in the face of adversity. Her story became one that was told and retold, a tale of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of hope. And though Caleb had long since continued his own journey, his role in her life remained a cherished memory, a reminder that even a stranger's kindness could spark the light of survival and change the course of a life forever. Ahivna had closed her eyes to die, but instead she had opened them to life, full, vibrant, and rich with possibility. And she walked forward, confident, strong, and free.